Why is it that the contemporary imagination has become limited? What seems to be innate and inseparable from us cuts both ways. The restrictions to possibility are also the means for all possibilities of the post-human and the technological utopia. With this in mind, Half-Past Human manifested as a channel of an experimental form of dialogue, with a generation coming to terms with their condition, a cyborg fed the digital commodity. Join us as we discuss the most prominent vulnerabilities and implications of current digital media culture trends. I'm your co-host, Kobe Hobbs, and this is Half-Past Human podcast. All right. Hello. How are you? So first thing first, protocols. How are you? If you want to introduce yourself, your major, where you're from, and whatnot.
Sure. I'm Jackson Whisenhunt. This is my first semester being a sophomore. I'm a degree seeker at JCU. My major is political science, and I have a minor in art history, and I am from Dubai.
Nice. So I'm sure, as you know, I've told you to read some things. So did you happen to look into the new Apple software update at all?
I looked into your weekly readings, and you've told me a little bit about the Apple software. You told me the controversy behind it of Apple is looking through photos to detect just sensitive information that could,
Well, mostly they pushed it back. Originally, the update was going to come out for iOS 15 in September, but as you were saying, there was a bunch of pushback about it. But essentially, they were trying to collect a lot of data from their users to find CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material, and they were going to databases from law enforcement agencies that they have in the States of already known paraphernalia for child sexual abuse material. They were going to use that in their database to define images on users' iPhones that they upload into the iCloud, and then from there they could determine if somebody had sexual abuse materials on their phone, and then they would have to verify it by one of the employees before that. But not only that, they also have
Apple employees.
Yeah, Apple employees. So once the algorithm already says, hey, this is CSAM, then an employee has to verify it before they take any action or refer it to law enforcement.
Sure.
But it wasn't just that, it's also we also have to talk about this. It's not implemented fully yet. So it's something that they eventually will do, but they haven't done yet.
Okay.
But even things in their iMessaging where they use machine-based learning to essentially blur CSAM. So I'm saying CSAM a lot because it's easier than saying child sexual abuse material. But I don't know if you happen to look at the Apple's website under the child safety features for it, but I think you should definitely check it out. But there's quite an images that shows how it would look, the iOS software, once they use this stuff.
And how would it look?
I can show you.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Child safety. So, it's a couple things. So here is for iMessaging. So look, they say helping the community safe. So as you can see, Apple products can help protect kids from sending or viewing photos that may be sensitive with resources to guide them. So also a part of this feature is also to protect children too.
Sure.
Not just sexual predators.
Yes.
It's a way as when children are communicating with each other through these devices. So it says, on-device intelligence can detect potentially sexual explicit photos and messages and provide a two-step intervention to help a child make a choice whether to send or view them. Apple does not get access to these photos. So it says, check out this photo. It says this may be sensitive, view photo. And then it says, could this be sensitive, or are you sure? So you have to go through all these protocols before you can view this. Which they also say that Apple isn't necessarily using through messaging, like they're not recording these messaging or these messages or keeping them in their database, which that's only through messaging apps, right?
Gotcha.
or also through Siri. So it's one of the things that they're using. I see it says expanded guidance in Siri and search. So if one was to use Siri for a search and it's explicit materials, they can have, through their algorithms, a built-in thing that inhibits that. So if somebody was to search for something, obviously I'm sure you could guess what that might mean. So here it says like material depicting the sexual abuse of children is illegal. So it's going to make a referral saying, hey, like what you're doing is obviously morally wrong. But the thing that's really, the thing that I'm arguing a lot is it's less of the messaging aspect and the Siri aspect, but it's the idea of them being able to collect photos.
Yeah.
Okay, so after that's out the way. So we were talking about the idea of uploading the photos into iCloud.
Sure.
So obviously this has a lot of potential. Like I don't want to focus too much on the privacy aspect. I want to focus more on the digital media aspect of it. But just in regards to privacy, it's also, I don't know if you've read the Snowden article, but he talks about it, the whole way Apple can collect these photos or detect this sexual abuse material is by when users upload their photos to the iCloud.
Yeah.
Which I think the stat is around 88% of users do that, especially to conserve their data on their phone. But the thing is let's say this software comes out and you have known sexual abusers or predators. The way to bypass this, you just do not upload your photos to iCloud.
Yeah.
So it's not as if Apple is directly trying to prevent sexual abuse, because then they would just find a way where it's such an easy way to work your way around it. You just don't
exactly.
Upload your
It
photos
sounds
to
like
iCloud.
just don't put it on iCloud and it's still your privacy, so to speak.
Yeah, but the thing is, there's also this going more into the political landscape of this, but there's a lot of implications and potential like things that can be done with when Apple's able to do this. I mean, you see Apple already goes through these issues all the time, where you see like in China where they can censor certain things or not allow certain things on iPhones. So who's to say that if you have this software, you have this ability to essentially take users' photographs and like see, like run through them essentially and pair them with known things in the database to use an algorithm to pull it out, which is a lot of things happens like that in WeChat, for example, going in China. Like if you have known anti-communist propaganda on your WeChat, who controls that app can pull that out and subject you to the CCP. So I mean, there's these large implications with it that's are kind of scary when you think about it.
Well, I was gonna say it kind of sounds like so long as it's not on a cloud, it's your private. It's your private content, so to speak. But once it goes to Apple consider it's no longer yours.
Yeah.
It's Apple's, and they can do whatever they want with that. Right now, it seems like, if you look at it from a just point face value, if they're doing this to take actions against sexual predators, it sounds great, but that's just what they're doing it for right now. Remember, like it's their once it's on the cloud, it's their property, so to speak. It's their content. It's not yours anymore. Who's to say that trend of protecting children is going to continue? It could become something more nefarious, more controversial.
Yeah, it's also too, Apple's been known for one of the connotations around their brand is privacy. But now it's almost as if they substitute privacy for protection, as if that's better. Which I've seen, it's almost like a historical reoccurrence. I mean, think about 9/11, think about flying, right? A catastrophe happens where then you can limit yourself to certain rights, and that's acceptable. But that's also the political landscape. That's less of the digital media landscape.
I was going to say that just seems to be a general trend with politics today, subsidizing privacy for protection.
Yeah. was another, let's see, you read weeks 11, so let's see, you
10, 11, 12.
So you went into post-humanism and technological fetishism, right?
Yes.
So what were your thoughts on that? How would you, if you're familiar with post-humanism, how would you kind of relate that to this case study that we're talking about now?
I mean, concepts were a little advanced, but I definitely saw that what you were talking about with, especially post-humanism, is there's been a revolution that's taken place between the relationship of technology and humans. And when I say humans, I mean that very generally, very vaguely. Human to human interaction, human to technology interaction, and even humans in private settings. The way they interact now is completely changed because of technology, and you could kind of encapture that in this post-humanist revolution concept that you're talking about. Is there like a specific angle you...
I mean, no, I think more when I think of post-humanism, it's also this notion that kind of emerged during the 40s. I mean, right around the Turing machine, and also this idea. I mean, I think the original concept was based on the idea of pilots, right? So they saw the pilot and the plane as a single entity, and together they made predictable behaviors that you could measure. And ever since that, the whole notion of humanity has been based around that. It's this humankind rather, and the machine as a single entity. And this is also with, I forgot his name, Martin, I'm not even going to refer to his name, but he calls it the fourth discontinuity of mankind. So the first one was this idea.
I remember you told me. It was man's separation from the heavens. Then it was man's separation from the wildlife.
Yeah, right? It was Darwin, when Darwin...
And then man's separation from religion.
Well, no, it was the idea that the earth revolves around the sun instead of the sun revolves around the earth. Or rather, the universe revolves around the earth. And then Freud and his idea of the unconscious and childhood trauma. And then the fourth discontinuity is essentially the idea of not being able to distinguish humankind and machine, which I think it's a very abstract notion. It doesn't necessarily apply to everything, but I also feel like
Well, it's interesting. This just came to my mind, how you're saying there's an absence between a difference between a human and a machine, yet Apple still, even if it's through the cloud, it recognizes that something might be scandalous content. It still needs to verify through a human as well.
Yeah,
that's an interesting kind of block to that.
But I also feel too, I think I was talking about this rendition of the Shannon Weaver model, right? It's almost like this twofold communication, right? Where it's like, granted, these algorithms are supposed to, things can get lost in translation when they're transcoded, right?
Yeah.
So like,
in this sense, it's pretty difficult to miscommunicate, child predators.
Yeah. But there's also, there's known algorithms with it. Like, there's one thing that Apple's doing right now. I don't know if it's in one of the most recent iOS software updates. You have an iPhone, right? Yeah. So I think it's one where you can go through your photo albums, and it can say like known selfies or selfies with friends.
Yes.
And it'll place, like, you don't choose this. You don't go out in your photo albums and pick this. But Apple uses an algorithm that automatically curates all these photos of selfies with you and your friends and puts them in an album. And I had this done on mine, and I had like random screenshots of things that were none of my friends or pictures I took with my friends. But it's this algorithm kind of misfires or curates the wrong images. And so, there's obviously things that can be lost in translation.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, this whole time when I'm arguing this, I'm not... granted, there's this idea that this is a great thing, right? Like, they're catching sexual predators. Yeah. Of course, I'm not arguing that
I get it. Yeah. It's what's down the line.
It's not even what's down the line. It's just like the whole way, and I will go ahead and reach into this concept, this idea of technological fetishism, which is Jody Dean and communicative capitalism. It's a concept of that theory. And it's the idea that every issue that we have, we fetishize with technology to solve it, right?
I was actually thinking the same exact concept when you were showing me how iMessages says if it's the recipient is a child, it would say, maybe don't open this photo, or there's systems in place that make it, there are rules and protections in place for children using, or minors using iMessage or texting with an iPhone. It seems as if the solution once was, don't put kids on technology.
Exactly.
Now the solution is, have technology protect your kids from technology itself. Yeah.
Or don't think about educating children in another way. Think about just prohibiting them to do certain things with technology. And it's almost like, we're already so integrated in with technology that there's no going back. Like it's like because everything is transcoded. Like everything is almost digital, right? So like, of course, every answer that we see fit has to be digital, or it has to be reworked or remediated within this. Everything is digitally commodified. So the only way to answer it is with something else that's digital, which is also, I think, a very bad take on every issue we have. Like there have to be different approaches, right? Like, I mean, like you think about our whole climate issue right now, our whole climate crisis. What do? Carbon capture technology, electric cars. Instead of having different takes on it, like how about let's re-look at the fossil fuel industry. Let's re-look at that. It's like, no, we just develop technology where we can keep doing the things that we're doing, but we just have this device or this technological tool that can help us continue down this path. It's like it pollutes our minds with everything. That's how we need to solve things.
This is just for debate's sake, but how much of that is technology's fault and how much of that is just like money's fault? Because money talks.
Yeah.
And if a fossil fuel company doesn't want to, have a public inspection of how it works, the consequences of how it works, money talks, and money can prevent stuff like that from happening. So the only other solution might be financing new technologies that coexist with those currently existing systems like fossil fuel companies. That's just an argument I would make in response to that. But I totally get what you're saying in the sense that once a technology exists and once we become assimilated to it, and I think we become assimilated to it very quickly. For example, TikTok it's the newest social media, and yet I don't know a lot of people who don't have it. Almost everyone I know does have TikTok. So it assimilates very quickly. And what I'm saying is, once we get a technology or an extension given from an already held technology, i.e. the iPhone is it holds TikTok. Once we get that technology, it becomes unimaginable to reverse and not have that technology anymore.
It's also too, exactly what you're saying, but it's so easily accepted and integrated into existence.
It's accepted,
right? Before, because we
can't imagine life without it.
Yeah, that too. But we also accept it when we don't even consider like the broader set of phenomena that's at play, or we just accept this technology, and by the time we accept it, as you're saying, we can't go back. So we can't have like an unblemished subjective thought of what this technology is actually adjusting our culture, or the idea that a computational layer over a culture is going to morph it in some way, right? So like when TikTok comes out, right, you see how it's one of the extremely innovative social media compared to all the rest of them. Like essentially it's all videos, and the videos play before you even
you don't have to do anything.
And we just think about how massively popular it is right now. And like before it's catered to the masses. It's not like, okay, let's do a case study with this. Let's look at this, see what this implies, how this is changing our understanding of communication or social media now, because social media is already a completely separate entity that's like could be studied. Like, I think you can major in social media by now.
You definitely could. You definitely could.
So and we just accept it, and it's progressing so fast before we can even think about it. And it's already too late, and something else new has already came out before we even realize what the previous technology has done to us.
Well, it's actually kind of funny that you're talking about this, because yesterday I was having a conversation with a friend. We were going out to lunch, and we were walking past the Villa Farnese, and we were talking about, the wealthy back then got great food, they were given fresh water, they were given the chance to look at beautiful art, they were given the chance to travel, they were given the chance to talk with interesting people, beautiful people, capable people, creative people, and really we were talking about how those are the real luxuries, and therefore the ultra wealthy of that time period would be equally as happy, if not happier, than the ultra wealthy of this period. And then that conversation transformed to, well, does improvement and change mean the same thing? If everything's changing so rapidly, can we really call it improvement, or can we call that change? And similarly, and a second question off of that original question is, how do you define improvement when you have change, especially with technology changing so quickly? How can you call it improvement? Is it improvement? Is Apple taking your data, your content from your phone onto the cloud and making it Apple's content? Is that improvement, or is that just change? It goes to the same question of just how quickly technology advances, and how that's just change, and we call it improvement.
Yeah, it's also too, I think it's like, I think a lot of, especially with technology, another reason why it progresses so easily is, as I was saying, the fetishization, that's the way we should go as an answer to our problems. So the thing that propels this innovation in technology is we're always predicting what the implications or what it's going to grant us, right? So to go back on Jody Dean, this idea of communicative capitalism is, before the internet, right when the internet was coming around, this neoliberal idea that it was going to make the internet was going to be democratic, right? But it wasn't. It happened not to. Because, I mean, granted, if you look at it retrospectively, like before the internet's coming around, you live in a democratic society. You think, all right, there's going to be this entity that comes around where it's going to make everybody super interconnected, and everybody can share an opinion. Everybody can speak their voice, and it's all on one platform that everybody can connect to.
Yeah.
That seems like a utopia, right? Like a technological utopia. Like,
in a sense,
in a sense, and that's how we thought it was going to be. But as soon as the technology comes around, and then you have Telecommunications Act of 97 signed by Clinton that opened it up to capitalism, right? Like, then things just are not what they originally were thought to be. And then, so I think it's the same thing. You could apply that to what's going on with Apple right now. Like, you think, oh, we're going to be able to catch sexual predators, like, because, I mean, Apple has 1 billion users right now, currently. So you think, out of those 1 billion, how many of those are predators? Oh, we could catch all of them, because, I mean, phones are extended of our existence, right? Like, this is essentially everything on your phone. Like, if I want to know a person, I would rather go through your phone than actually talk to you. Yeah. I could know more about you than going through your phone and your images and actually talking to you.
Probably.
So then we have this fetishization. They're like, okay, if Apple develops a software where they can catch CSAM or whatever, then it's going to solve like sexual predators, which is not what's going to happen.
The pathway to hell is paved in good intentions.
Exactly.
It's the same.
But at the same time, it's still conflicting, because you're like, well, it still might catch sexual predators. So do we completely go down this route and just accept the larger implications that might be used with it? I don't know. It's very...
It is difficult. It's controversial. It makes me think there was this person came up with a response to why research, especially modern day research, is often considered controversial, especially with technology. And what he was saying is, it is difficult to call research wholly an improvement or an improvement. Sure, let's just say an improvement because I can't think of any other words. But he says the difficulty with this is there are pluralistic societies. So it's not a society is all one thing or all a different. There are mixes and differences and difference of values and opinions within a collective society. And so you can't wholly call something good or bad just because it will benefit some people, but it'll also leave others at a disadvantage or maybe feeling ignored or left out. And basically what this goes back to is if I'm trying to phrase this right, losing my thought. I completely lost my thought.
It's all right. But okay, let's see. Maybe I can branch in. So I also wanted to talk about, I think it's this idea when we, again, going back to fetishizing over technology, and it's the answer. And what you're saying that it has both sides of morality, the good and evil, right? Of good things it can do and also bad things it can do. I think the reason that it is also scary is because who are the ones that have this power, this divine power of technology holding everybody?
And are we just supposed to trust?
Yeah, like you complete, like, okay, think about Apple, Google. I mean, richest companies ever in all of human existence. And it's been proven time and time again of what they value, right? It's capital, it's your data. And it's for this first time ever that we're almost out of this, we're out of capitalism now. We're in this idea of a post-capitalist society. It's with this Greek philosopher, I think I've talked to you about him, Giannis Varoufakis. Can't pronounce his last name, but anyways, he has this idea of techno-feudalism, right? So it's this idea that before, like, okay, let's use some Marxism right here, but before capitalism, like on the onset of capitalism, work and leisure were separated, right?
Sure.
So you had the proletariat class that would go to work and then they would go home, and that was their leisure. And there was no capital being made off their leisure time. But now work and leisure have sort of blended together. So the idea of you go to work, you're a working class person, right? You go to work, yada, yada, yada. You come home, you hop on your computer, you get on Google, you get on Facebook. At that same time, Google and Facebook are making capital off you just off your leisure time alone.
Yeah.
Anytime, and yet you hold no share in their stock or anything, but they're making capital off of you, your capital, even though you're not working for them. When you're using Google Maps, they're tracking your movements. They're saying, okay, when here, okay, he stopped here for a minute, there's a lot of traffic. They're monetizing that, right? That data. And they're making capital off of that. So it's this idea where it's almost capitalism has evolved within itself, right? So,
capitalism in the times of Max Weber or Adam Smith, they wouldn't recognize capitalism today. Yeah. And they probably argue it's not a good system.
And the thing is when you have those systems, right? This post-capitalist society, this techno-feudalist society that you could argue that we're living in, and these entities are the ones that have control and the innovators of this technology. And the thing is, we're relying on their innovations to solve all problems. And that's the largest issue I think is at play right here, because we just blatantly accept it, or willingly, fully accept it, integrate all this technology and use it or think to use it for every issue that we have. And I think that's a very dangerous game to play without having a nuanced view of what's going on and nuanced views on how to tackle new issues and problems.
You kind of made me think of how there's a saying that religion is the opium of the masses. And that was said because 100 years ago, the wealthy capitalists of Europe kept religion to keep people down. Now it's kind of reversed, and technology is what keeps people down as well. But it promises, freedom and leisure and happiness in the same way. So it's kind of like technology is now the opium of the masses in that sense. And ironically, religion or any other of the very, very, very few aspects of life that technology hasn't really gotten across, just because it's so intrinsically human. There's very intrinsically human characteristics to it. Those are our only escapes now. Yeah. Just something that came into my head at the time. But I remember, to the point I was trying to make earlier, and I found the quote I was looking for, if I can get it again. It was here. So what he was saying is a big reason why technology continues to expand is because it's not always easy to distinguish between like good and treacherous research, or in this case technology, because culturally pluralistic societies have diverse values and ethics, and some research, or in this case technology, appears to have valuable ethical applications to one part of that society, but it's at odds with another. Yeah. And that's what I was trying to get at earlier. I was trying to think of the quote more specifically, but I couldn't. It eluded me. But now I remember that argument I was trying to say. And I think it's very relevant and true. And it also explains why technology is so controversial today, because it constantly, every single time there's change, it puts people into two camps. There's those who it benefits. Very polarizing. There's those who it benefits in the society, and then there's those who are put at odds to it. And that with Apple's CSAM detection. CSAM detection. In this case, it's ethical and who they're dividing.
I mean, not many people are going to argue against
exactly, that, but the problem is this road doesn't have an end where it can continuously divide people, and at some point it will put you in this camp that's disassociated with everybody else, and maybe this one won't be a morally right reason. Whereas it is,
I get what you're saying too about technology being polarizing, but I feel like a lot of, at least in Western democratic societies, where the majority of these big tech hubs are, there's almost becoming like within it, there's probably subcultures, obviously. It's this whole hot button issue, misinformation, and that's a whole other story with algorithms and everything. But this idea that I think there will be one point when there's almost like a singularity with everybody, where, there's this, I know I've talked to you about this Marshall McLuhan idea of collective consciousness and the noosphere and everything. But I see it less of that. I see it's more, because this is going back what I was saying about why it's dangerous, because who are the ones that seem to be controlling this meaning? And it's not like has the phrase virtuous capitalist, that's very conflicting, I think. I don't think we can rely
in the modern age.
In the modern age. Or how about the virtuous capitalist conglomerate, right? Like that's very conflicting terms. I don't think those can go together. But like there's so many, it's completely adjusting ideology or making this false consciousness of just accepting it. Like think about, go back to social media for a minute. So this idea of, I forgot the scholar's name, but she talks about social media ideology, right? So think about how social media has adjusted our whole understanding of social communication, right?
Yeah.
And
I think the way people flirt and how they use it through social media is, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but that's, I think, is a bizarre change of how we flirt today because of social media. Continue.
But I think it's not even just the communication, it's also like certain aspects of it. Like, just think about an Instagram account, right? That's 24/7 hour social visibility. Anybody can go to your profile and view you at any time. But it's not only that, it's the idea of how you exist within social media matrix, right? So when you log on to Instagram or you create an Instagram account, which is owned by Facebook, or rather Meta now. Yeah, whatever. But like, but like, they have determined. It's almost as if they're a divinity, right? They have determined, because an Instagram account is almost a human in itself, right? Because it is essentially almost everything now, right? So they have determined, okay, this is your profile. You're limited to, you can have one profile picture. You can have a 400-word bio. That's it. You can post a certain amount of pictures within a certain grid. It only allows for certain much. Oh yeah, and whatever you post, we're going to determine and run it through our database if it's okay to post it. So they have completely, and that's our main field of communication now. Like, people use it for absolutely everything. And then people that are off of those social media accounts, their ideology of existence or how they communicate is completely separate. It's almost two separate humans.
Pluralistic, the divide.
Yeah, the divide. So, and the thing is, but it's seemingly becoming impossible to be like, I know I'm off social media. Like, it's difficult because you miss certain things and you can't connect with certain people. Like, I mean, like, now it's expected, like, you go to a company's website, it's like, oh, DM this account or something, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's created two separate things, and the ones that are having this control are monetizing it. It's not as if they're providing something for us for these moral reasons. It's, I mean, granted, there's obviously a lot of upside to social media, but
at the end of the day,
it's a profit, right? It's a capitalist regime. Like, the reason they're doing it is to make capital.
Yeah.
So they're getting to determine all these things, and it's not if they're doing it as if, refer this to theology, it's a God making beings because he's lonely. That's not what it is. They're creating own beings and modes of existence for capital.
Sure.
And that's why I think it's very dangerous. And then any new innovation, Apple's CSAM software, you have to be skeptical. As virtuous as it sounds, and as great as it sounds, and as 1984 as it also sounds, you still have to take it with a grain of salt, I think.
And I think it's just that this is a new fear. It's as technology, and when I say technology, I'm using this very vaguely. I don't mean technology as in it's a screen. I mean technology as in literally a written book is a form of technology, or the printing press is a form of technology. And I think this fear of control and whoever's in charge of printing or putting out this information, that's what social media is in a sense. It's just information and data. Whoever controls that's always been a fear. It's just that now technology more than ever, and the trend in which it's going, it's only going to continue. It only becomes more and more and more integrated into society's everyday life on every single rung of the social ladder. And that's why it's getting scarier, because it's only growing more apparent. And I think that's why people should be getting scared. And people are starting to get a little scared. They're starting, at least from the sentiment I'm getting from a lot of friends and just movements I'm seeing, or how many people detox from social media and technology nowadays. People are starting to kind of be a little afraid. They're starting to question.
Yeah, they question it. They feel it. I mean, but they know that it's not. That goes back to what we were saying earlier about how it's so quickly accepted, and then without even realizing exactly what it is, you just buy in very quickly.
And it's so different than anything else, because everything else we're skeptical of change, and then once it's technology, in the sense of a screen, in the sense of mobile technology, we don't even question it. We don't stop and think we can do this, but should we? It's just out there.
Yeah.
Again, there's monetary profit to be made by those who put it out there.
Yeah.
And did you ever give consent to that, even though you're a using customer of what they're providing you?
Yeah. I mean,
Do they have to give you consent? I don't know. It's difficult.
It's also the way. Just buying the product alone.
Buying the product alone, yeah.
But using it rather. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to. I think we should talk a little bit more about some digital media concepts that we honestly have been talking about. We just never necessarily labeled them.
Sure.
But there's so what we were talking about too, I think it's one thing that this idea of the double logic of immediacy and hypermediacy. So immediacy is basically, make sure, because sometimes I mix the two up. So immediacy is a phenomenon of what I wrote here, where the medium becomes ever transparent, and thus the lines between experience, organic reality, and digital hyperreality become blurred so as not to see the border that inhibits a complete immersed experience. So this is where the medium, so you think of immediacy, right? So let's a more analog example, not necessarily analog because it's still pretty digital, but this idea of, think about AirPods, right? Okay. So we went from wired headphones.
Yeah.
And it was very obvious that you were listening to music, you could feel it, you were walking around, you're at the gym, it gets hooked on something, and you had earbuds in.
Yeah.
With AirPods come around, how many times have you just, I don't know if you use AirPods.
I don't have AirPods.
Yeah, well, you're that guy.
Yeah, I'm that guy.
But there's so many times where I've had AirPods in and I don't even realize that I'm connected with this form of technology, right? It's just there. I don't notice it. I could have them in all day and hardly notice it. But I'll notice sometimes somebody's trying to talk to me. I'm like, why am I going deaf? I'm like, oh, I have AirPods in. So that's this idea of immediacy. And then hypermediacy is this kind of the complete opposite, where within these also are very applied to the interface, right? So immediacy would be, I don't know, the primary, it's easier to talk about hypermediacy at the interface, right? So this idea of, as you see on the computer, I can interact with this hypermediacy, the closed tab is right here.
Sure.
So it's exposed to me and I'm able to see it, and that's my way of interacting, right? So I think another thing that's dangerous, and this goes a lot on what you were talking about, the consent, where and it's so easy to consent. So you think about, this goes back also to transcode. That's why I love this, because they all just interlink. So it goes back to transcoding, right? So how is the computational layer of expressibility or something, anything that we humans do, how does that change our culture, right? So think about the immediacy of iPhotos, iCloud. So before, when you take photos, analog photos, physical photos, you had a photo book, right? You set it in a drawer, you set it on the table, it was there. Your representation of it, or where you knew it was at in space and time, was on your table. But now, I have, by far, you probably have more photos on your photo album than your mom has taken with a film camera in your whole life, right? You probably have thousands and thousands of photos, right?
I have 400, but yes.
But a lot of people, okay.
Yeah.
And then it's becoming invisible. You just, send it to the iCloud, and I'm pretty sure Apple has a feature too where they can, those photos actually disappear and they go to your iCloud. They're no longer showed on your device, on your phone. And you would have to log on to your iCloud on a Mac or whatever to look at them. So it's also this idea of changing our idea of how we store documentation or photos, right? It's seemingly invisible. That's how we store stuff. It has to be invisible. It has to be digital. So when you have that new perception, what happens? Apple will capitalize on that. They'll be like, okay, our new cultural understanding or expectation of how we store things, it has to be digital and seemingly invisible. So we're going to monetize that.
Out of sight, out of mind, don't worry.
Exactly. So when you have this new cultural understanding, then you can monetize that. You can take advantage of that. So yeah, that's the idea of immediacy and hypermediacy.
Okay, very interesting.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
So I also call that the emergence of the paradoxical transparency.
Well, I was going to say, you could even get down to that very, very, very intimately with the example of, I don't have an Apple Watch, but I know Apple Watches, they can tell your heart rate, how you're breathing, they can tell how well you've been sleeping and all that. And it's all from these sensors under the watch itself.
Yeah.
And it's immediate. You don't have to go to a doctor. There's no stethoscope. Doctor's not listening to your heartbeat or anything. It's all there, literally on your wrist, and it's quantifying all this data immediately off of your very own skin, and you're wearing the device.
Yeah.
That's a very
But that's also too, which we were saying you could also apply both this idea of immediacy and hyperimmediacy. That so the immediacy would be
both.
Yeah, so the immediacy would be the sensors in the watch that you cannot see or feel, but that are actually connecting you with this device, and it measures your vitals. And then the hyperimmediacy is the visuals on the interface that are showing you what your vitals are.
I understand. Okay.
So let's see. What else? We covered a lot.
That's good.
Posthumanism, techno-feudalism, this idea of immediacy, hyperimmediacy. I don't think you read anything about the TCPs or IPs. That's also, I think we can save that. Let's see here.
So,
Okay, go ahead. Well, so I just want to say, usually I'd like to end with maybe the guests giving a little monologue of whatever they want to talk about. Yeah, usually. This first time ever podcast, you know. But go ahead.
Sure. I think the relationship between humanity and technology is such an interesting one to look at. And this largely came from reading Homo Deus, which is a book by Yuval Noah Harari. He's
the same guy that wrote *Sapiens*?
Yes.
Okay.
He's a historian and he's a historian at the University of Jerusalem, and he writes profound insights and questions on basically how did we get here and where are we going. And that's what his book Homo Sapien is, how did we get here? And his book Homo Deus is where are we going? And his insights really blew my mind, just the plethora of unanswered questions we have with technology, unanswered in every sense. And how do we use it? What should we use? What shouldn't we use? How do we decide what technology is good? What's ethical? What's not ethical? Who should be in charge of it? I mean, these are questions we were going throughout the entire podcast. And it was really relevant in my mind when we started doing my thesis for my English class. And so I was writing about how the solution, realistically, at least through my eyes, the solution to how integrated technology is, the solution to that, if we considered a problem, the solution isn't fixing it with more technology. And the solution is not abolishing technology either. The solution is finding a definition and finding values which we can find in everyday life that can help us explain a life with technology. Because every single concept which we know of, which has ever been written down up until about 40 years ago, has all been based on the concept of what's naturally around us. So religion, faith, animals, these concepts, because they've always been around, we've shifted our definition of life and our view of life around that. The thing is, this is so revolutionary, we don't. And so my paper is saying the solution to technology isn't more technology or less, it's finding definitions and values today which can set up a life living with technology. And not only that, it will also, a new definition of life will also help us define what technology we want to use in the future and what technology we should make in the future. Because right now we don't have these values in place. We're going off of old thought processes and old philosophies and beliefs. And because of that, we don't know what is what Apple is doing. Is it good? Is it moral? We don't, just you can keep asking a million questions on that. And what I'm saying is, if we make new values and we make a new definition of life, we can. It will benefit us, because with that, we'll have a new way of thinking, which is in line with the stream of technology which we see coming out today. And I guess from that, I can leave off with this question, which Yuval Noah Harari wrote, which blows my mind, and I think about it a lot, especially when I was writing this paper. And he says, "What do we want to become?" This question, sometimes known as the human enhancement question, dwarfs the debate that currently occupies politicians, philosophers, and scholars and ordinary people. The question of how we use technology. I think that's just a good way to finish off this podcast. Yeah. I hope it's just a relevant quote to finish this off.
Nice. Thank you again for your time. I appreciate you doing this.
No, I appreciate it as well.
All right.